6:50 in the morning. Adelaide Pierce stood at the seaport curb in a camel trench coat, breath ghosting. Her driver had called in sick. She opened Ride Match and accepted the first profile. Caleb Whitmore, 37, 4.9 stars. A gray Toyota Camry pulled up 3 minutes later. The man behind the wheel wore a faded button-down, pressed sharp at the collar. She slid in without looking. Boston Financial Tower, 7:30. He nodded, set the navigation, shifted into drive. In the rear view, his eyes crossed her exactly once. Not looking at her, reading her. She did not know. In 6 hours, the man she had just filed under irrelevant would save her company. 6:54. The Camry rolled into the slow grind of Seaport Boulevard, and Adelaide was already on her first call of the morning, voice low, controlled, walking her chief counsel through the Halverson LOI for the 4th time since the previous night. Caleb drove without the radio, both hands at 9 and 3, his eyes flicking to the mirror every 7 seconds with the regularity of a metronome. He changed lanes 3 times in 5 minutes, each one a fraction earlier than the cars around him registered the gap, the kind of preemptive driving that did not announce itself. Adelaide ended the call and looked up for the first time. The Camry had just made a left where the navigation had said straight. "Where are you going?" Her voice was clipped, not unkind, just compressed. "Cutting through Atlantic Wharf," he said quietly. "Saves 4 minutes at this hour. The lights at Congress are out of phase this morning." She did not answer. She returned to her iPad. In her head, the categorization happened automatically and without inspection. Gig driver. Harmless. Irrelevant. She had done it 10,000 times in 3 years of running Meridian. Fast triage. Fast filing. No revisiting. The second call came in. Sophia. Halverson had arrived at the tower early. Adelaide pushed the internal briefing back 10 minutes and pulled up the deck preview. $38 million, the proof of concept anchor for the entire northern expansion. The whole thing rested on Meridian's cold chain operational record, holding clean. Halverson was the kind of investor who saw a single hairline fracture and walked. A delivery truck shouldered out of a side street without signaling. The Camry slid laterally 18 inches without a tap of the brake, without a jolt, without a sharp inhale from the front seat. The whole maneuver took maybe a second and a half. Adelaide felt none of the lurch she usually felt in a near miss. She looked up. Caleb's shoulders had not changed. His hands were still at 9 and 3. He had not glanced at the mirror to check whether she had noticed, the way drivers did when they wanted credit. He had simply done it and kept going. Some fine instrument inside her, the same one that had built 3 divisions, made a small involuntary note. Competence. She set it aside. Good drivers were not rare. The third call was Sophia again, and the strain in her voice was unmistakable. "Della, we have a situation. The Halverson team just sent an emergency flag. One of the refrigerated shipments on the Hartwell-Carrollton corridor, the proof of concept run, lost temperature integrity sometime in the last 12 hours. Cold chain monitoring did not trigger an alert. The cargo is compromised. They are calling it a breach of operational SLA. Adelaide sat up. Damage estimate? 400,000 to 600,000 on the cargo. But that is not the issue. Halverson is using it as grounds to pause the full commitment. Emergency review. Get me Jasper. And get me Hartwell hub system logs for the last 72 hours. She ended the call. In the rear view, Caleb's eyes were on her. Not pitying, not curious. Just processing. "Which northern route is Halverson questioning?" he asked, quietly, as though the question had been waiting for an opening rather than forcing one. "The corridor through the Hartwell hub, or the cutoff that bypasses it?" She looked at him the way a person looks at a piece of furniture that has just spoken. "That is not your concern." She returned to the iPad. Caleb did not answer. He kept the wheel straight, his eyes on the road, counting seconds, and waited. 7:18. The Camry was 6 blocks from the Boston Financial Tower, and Adelaide was deep in the data Sophia had forwarded, dense columns of timestamps, sensor IDs, temperature readings drifting upward in increments. She did not have the technical context to fully read. The numbers told a story. She just did not know which story. Her phone lit up. Jasper Caldwell, CFO, 7 years at the company. The voice that came through the speaker was smooth, measured, prepared. "Della, This is an operational failure. Plain and simple. The Northern Corridor team did not follow protocol. I have already flagged it to the logistics director, who approved the 3 a.m. routing. A small pause. That is being looked into. From the front seat, without turning around, Caleb spoke. His voice was low, almost conversational. Ma'am, ask him when the maintenance window for the Route 9 relay was logged, and whether the maintenance schedule was updated in the central system before the routing decision was signed. Adelaide froze. She looked at the back of Caleb's head. That was not a driver's question. That was an engineer's. She repeated his question into the phone, word for word. The silence on Jasper's end stretched long enough for her to hear her own pulse against the speaker. I will need to check the records, he said finally. Pull them now. By the time I am at the office, she hung up. The Camry slid into a short-term parking bay half a block from the tower. Caleb put it in park, set the brake, and turned around for the first time. He rested one arm on the back of the front seat and waited. Who are you? Adelaide asked. He looked at her steadily. I am your driver today, ma'am. I know what the app says. Who are you actually? He hesitated. Then, before this, I was a senior systems engineer at Aldrich Infrastructure Group, Northern Division. 4 years. I left the industry 3.5 years ago. A pause. Aldrich designed Meridian's operational backbone 6 years ago. Routing algorithms, cold chain monitoring protocols, maintenance schedule architecture. Most of it came out of the division I worked in. She did not breathe for 3 seconds. You designed my system? I did not design your system. I designed the architecture your system runs on top of. He kept his voice even. There is a segment between the Hartwell Hub and Carrollton Junction, where the monitoring relay tower on Route 9, when it is in maintenance mode, generates an interference window of about 47 minutes. Inside that window, the alert signal is suppressed. It is not a catastrophic failure. It is a known gap. If a shipment crosses it at the wrong time, the temperature can drift past threshold before the system even registers a warning. You remember that segment exactly? I wrote the documentation for it. I proposed a patch twice before I left. It was never prioritized. Adelaide looked at him. Faded gray shirt, a small pale scar along his jaw, eyes that had seen more boardrooms than she had guessed. Come upstairs with me. I am a gig driver. You hired me to bring you here. I am asking you to come upstairs. He glanced at his phone. A quick check, no longer than that. School schedule. Then he nodded, once. In the elevator on the way to the 14th floor, Adelaide thumbed a message to Sophia. I am bringing someone up. Do not ask. Pull me the routing approval logs for the last 30 days, every maintenance schedule update, and the insurance documentation on every cold chain shipment that touched that window. All of it. 7:42. The glass-walled conference room on 14 smelled faintly of cold coffee and floor polish. Sophia came in with a laptop tucked under one arm and 3 printed sets of logs balanced on top. She glanced at Caleb for 1 full second, made an assessment Adelaide could not read, and then set the laptop down beside him without a word. She trusted Adelaide enough not to ask. That was a small mercy. Adelaide noted it. Caleb sat down, opened the laptop, and started working. His hands moved across the keyboard the way someone plays a piece of music they have known by ear for years. He did not narrate. He did not explain. Adelaide opened her own files across the table and tried to work in parallel, and after a few minutes, she realized she was watching him more than her own screen. The way his jaw set when he found a thread, the way his index finger tapped twice on the trackpad before he opened any new file, as though he were asking permission of the data. 20 minutes in, Sophia returned with a tablet. Her professional composure had thinned. Della. I found something else. 3 cold chain shipments in the last 30 days, all routed through the monitoring gap window, all underinsured at departure. The insurance adjustments were done manually. She swallowed. The approval signature on all 3 is the same. Jasper Caldwell. Caleb turned the laptop toward Adelaide. On the screen was a single line of modified system data, an entry inside the maintenance schedule records, time-stamped at 23:57, 18 days earlier. A retroactive update. Someone had gone into the central system after the fact and edited the maintenance window record to make the overlap with the routing decision look like a scheduling coincidence. This is not an operational failure, Caleb said. Someone modified the maintenance log retroactively to make this look like a coincidence. Combined with the underinsurance pattern, this is not negligence. Someone is orchestrating it. They route compromised cargo through the gap, claim insurance loss when temperature integrity fails, and sell the cargo off-book through a separate channel. He added, without looking up, at least 3 months, possibly longer if older records carry the same signature. Adelaide sat very still. Sophia stood beside her. Caleb waited. "Why didn't you say more in the car?" Adelaide asked finally. "You knew. I had a theory. I needed data. You could have pushed harder. You would not have listened." He said it without judgment, the way a person reports the weather. She wanted to disagree. She could not. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked at her. "In the car. When you asked about the northern route, I was rude to you. You were distracted. It is fine." "It is not fine. I dismissed you. People dismiss drivers. It is not unusual. That does not make it acceptable." He did not argue. He did not offer her absolution either. He just nodded, small and measured, and went back to the screen. Adelaide watched the way his fingers settled on the keys. Careful, nothing wasted. She thought of the last time she had seen anyone work like that, and the answer arrived before she could push it down. Her father. He had been gone 4 years now. She set the thought aside. She picked up her phone. "Jasper, conference room 14B 10 minutes. Bring Halverson on video." Jasper started to explain something. She ended the call mid-sentence. Sophia looked at Caleb. "Are you ready?" Caleb looked at the data on the screen one last time, lined up 3 folders square along the edge of the laptop, and nodded. 8:34, conference room 14B. Halverson came up on the wall screen from his Manhattan office, silver-haired, cold-eyed, leaning back in the manner of a man who had sat through a great many financial rooms and recognized the shape of a crisis before its name had been spoken. Jasper Caldwell walked in wearing a charcoal suit and a silk tie, and the particular professional smile of a man who believed he was about to manage a situation. He saw Caleb at the far end of the table and filed him as something low priority. IT contractor, probably. He sat down without acknowledging him. Adelaide did not introduce anyone. She nodded at Caleb. He spoke for 11 minutes without flourish, without accusation, simply stitching the fragments together. The modified maintenance logs, the underinsurance signatures, the pattern of losses tracking cleanly with a single approving authority. Timestamps at 23:57. Adelaide watched the room. She had sat down beside Caleb, not beside Jasper, and she realized only after the fact that she had chosen the side of the table without thinking. Halverson listened in silence for 10 minutes. Then he leaned forward slightly. "How long?" "At least 3 months. Caleb said. "Possibly longer. How did you identify it?" Adelaide answered before the pause could grow. "Someone who understands this system better than anyone else in this room." Halverson studied Caleb with the focused attention of a man who had just reclassified a variable. "And who are you?" "Caleb Whitmore. He is a consultant," Adelaide said, before she had quite decided to say it. Jasper, who had spent 20 minutes in a chair that seemed to be shrinking around him, finally spoke. The performance had drained out of his voice. What was left underneath was thinner. "This is being taken out of context. The insurance adjustments were risk management decisions. The maintenance log update was a clerical correction." "At 11:57 at night?" Sophia said quietly. "Using your direct credentials," Caleb added, without looking up from the laptop. "The system records user credentials on every retroactive log edit. It is a security feature. Whoever designed this architecture made sure no edit could be made anonymously." Jasper looked at the table. Halverson leaned back. "I propose we pause this conversation until Meridian's board has had a chance to review. If what is being presented holds up, my firm will need to revisit the structure of our commitment, not its existence." Adelaide processed it. Not its existence. The 38 million had not vanished. It was waiting on the house being put in order. "Full report by end of day Friday," she said. Halverson nodded once. The screen went black. The room exhaled. Jasper was escorted, politely, back to his office and asked to surrender his credentials. He did not argue. Whatever version of him had believed he could outmaneuver the systems he was supposed to protect had left the room before he did. His resignation came in before close of business. Adelaide accepted it without comment. When everyone else had filtered out, she found herself alone with Caleb at the conference table. The afternoon light had shifted, low and amber along the edge of the glass wall. He was packing the laptop away, coiling the cable into a neat figure 8 before tucking it into the case. "You could have said something earlier," she said. "In the car. You knew. I had a theory. I needed data. You still could have pushed harder. You would not have listened." She wanted to argue. She could not. "How long ago did you leave Aldrich?" 3.5 years. "Why?" He closed the laptop case and looked at her. "My wife left. My daughter was 5 and frightened. I could not be present for her and work a 100-hour week at the same time. I chose her." 1648. The sun was sliding down behind the glass and laying long bars of orange across the conference room floor. Caleb was zipping the laptop case. Adelaide had not moved from her chair. "Does she know what you gave up?" she asked. "She will, one day. Right now she knows her father picks her up from school every afternoon. That is enough." His phone lit on the table between them. His face changed, not dramatically, but completely, the way a compass needle finds north. He tilted the screen toward her for a second. A video call. A small face with brown eyes. A stuffed rabbit pressed against one cheek. "Daddy, Bramble found your gloves. Tell Bramble, those are my driving gloves. I need them back. Bramble says finders, keepers. Bramble and I are going to need to have a conversation." The girl laughed, open and untroubled. The laugh of a child who has never had to question whether the man on the other end of the line was coming home. The call lasted 38 seconds. When it ended, Caleb pocketed the phone and stood. Adelaide watched him. In the last several hours, he had been the most competent person in every room he had walked into. He had protected $38 million with nothing but pattern recognition and a set of skills he no longer advertised. And now he was packing up to leave because his daughter had called, and Bramble had found the gloves, and that was the only reason he needed. "I want to offer you a position," she said. "Systems Integrity Consultant. Full access to operational data. Full salary. Full benefits. You set your own hours within reason." She paused. "We clearly need someone who actually understands what is running underneath all of this." He did not answer right away. He did not say anything for a long stretch, and Adelaide realized she had grown used, in the space of a single day, to the rhythm of his silences. They were not evasions. Something was always happening inside them. "I need to be home by 3:30, he said finally. "School pickup. I will build it into the contract." He nodded once. It was not an enthusiastic nod. It was the nod of a man who had learned to weigh the cost of giving his time to a building and had decided this particular cost was one he could bear, not for himself, for Ella. "I will need full system documentation before I start. Not just the current operating manual, the original Aldrich specifications. You designed half of those, which is exactly why I need to see what has been changed since." She almost smiled. He left the conference room. She watched him walk down the hallway in his faded shirt and worn shoes, unhurried, not looking back. She stood at the glass wall as the afternoon light kept on lowering itself across the city, and she thought about the morning. The moment she had climbed into his car and dismissed him before he had finished setting the navigation, the way the mind makes its own shortcuts and calls them judgment. A habit, she thought, more expensive than she had realized. That night, Adelaide went home to her empty apartment on Beacon Hill and searched his name, Caleb Whitmore, Aldrich Infrastructure. The LinkedIn profile was still up, last updated late 2021. Below it, an old article in the Aldrich Engineering Quarterly, Cold Chain Monitoring, the 47-minute gap and how to close it, by Caleb Whitmore. The piece proposed, in clean and unembellished prose, the exact patch the company had never implemented. She read it twice, and then sat on her kitchen floor in the dark for a while without doing anything at all. The first 2 weeks, Caleb had a workstation near the systems team on the 14th floor. He came in at 7:30, made himself coffee in the small kitchen off the main floor, and worked until 2:55. Then he put on his coat and left to pick up Ella. In those 2 weeks, he found 3 additional irregularities in the cold chain monitoring architecture. One was a legacy gap from the original Aldrich design. 2 others had been introduced by system updates that had not been properly tested before deployment. He documented all 3 with the methodical precision of a man who had learned that the difference between a system that works and one that fails is usually a single unexamined assumption. The systems team, which at first had not known how to categorize a man who had arrived without a formal introduction and whose desk had simply appeared overnight, came to an instinctive understanding through proximity. They watched the way he worked, the way he explained problems, without condescension, without the impatience of a person performing expertise, with the clarity of someone who genuinely wanted the other person to understand. By the end of the 2nd week, they were bringing him problems before they escalated. By the end of the 1st month, they had begun to treat him as something close to essential. Adelaide walked past his workstation every day. Sometimes she paused. Sometimes she did not. She did not rush. He was not a man who could be rushed. She noticed small things. The way he laid his pen on the desk at exactly 90 degrees to the edge. The way he never went into the kitchen when someone else was already there. The way his shorthand notes on Post-its always had a tiny folded paper rabbit stuck to the corner. Week 4. A Thursday afternoon. Sophia knocked on Adelaide's door and closed it behind her. Della, I need to tell you something. Sophia sat down. Her hands were tight around her own knees. 10 months ago, before any of this, I noticed a pattern in the SLA reports. 3 shipments where the log delivery time and the GPS tracking time had small discrepancies. I raised it with Jasper Caldwell. He thanked me and said he would look into it. Nothing happened after that. A few weeks later, I was given a new project, and I assumed the issue had been handled. She drew a breath. I could have stopped this 3 months ago. I have been holding it in since Caleb broke the case. I did not say anything because I was ashamed. Adelaide looked at her for a long time. She remembered her own 2 passing instincts in the past year. The moments she had felt something was wrong and pushed the feeling down because the calendar would not allow it. It is not your fault, she said. The system was designed to suppress every signal coming from below. Sophia's eyes filled. Adelaide put a hand on her shoulder, gently, the first time in 2.5 years of working together that she had touched her. She understood, in that moment, that Caleb had not been the only invisible person in the building. Sophia had been, too, probably a dozen others. The culture she had built, the fast judgment, the asset or friction triage, had been quietly burying the very human warning systems that Caleb had once described in his article as a design flaw no algorithm had addressed. That night she emailed him. Could you meet me at Fogwell's in Beacon Hill on Saturday at 9? Bring Ella if you can. I want to talk about the scope of your role, and some other things. He replied 14 minutes later. Ella will like Fogwell's. They make waffles shaped like bears. Saturday, 9:04. Fogwell's, Beacon Hill. A small cafe with wooden tables and a window that took the autumn sun in slanted yellow slabs. Adelaide arrived first, in a cream sweater, no trench coat, no iPad. She sat at the corner table by the window and waited. Caleb and Ella came in together. Ella wore a navy hoodie with a moon embroidered on the chest, her arms wrapped around Bramble. She saw Adelaide and stopped, brown eyes large and assessing. Adelaide came down to the girl's level. Hi, Ella. I am Adelaide. Your dad helped my company avoid something pretty bad. Ella looked at Caleb to confirm. Caleb nodded. Ella sat down. She chose the seat next to Adelaide rather than the one next to her father. Caleb noticed. He did not comment. They ordered waffles. Ella told Adelaide about the little prince, the part with the fox, in a serious voice that suggested she had been holding the explanation back for the right person. Adelaide told her about her grandfather, a Maine harbor pilot, and the small lighthouse pin she wore on her collar. Ella reached out and touched the pin lightly with one fingertip, did not ask for it, just looked. Caleb listened. At the end of the meal, Ella asked to go outside to pet a golden retriever lying patiently at the next table. Caleb checked with the dog's owner, who waved her over. Adelaide turned to him. I read your article, the Aldrich Engineering Quarterly, the 47-minute gap. He did not look surprised. You looked me up. I looked you up. You proposed the patch. Twice. They turned you down. They did. Why? Implementation cost was $400,000. The ROI was not clean enough. Senior management decided not to prioritize. It was a reasonable corporate decision. On paper, Caleb, that gap was the one Jasper exploited. If they had implemented your patch, the fraud would not have been possible. True, but it could have happened somewhere else. A system has many gaps. You close one, people find another. That is how systems get manipulated, not by force, by looking where no one else looks. She watched him, the steadiness in him, and asked, "Do you miss the industry?" He looked out the window for a long moment. "I miss solving problems. I miss that standing ovation, not because of the applause, because of the feeling that I had finished something correctly. I do not miss the 100-hour weeks. I do not miss the day Lindsay left. I do not miss Ella at 5 years old, standing in the doorway, asking if I would be home tonight, and me lying to her." The silence that followed was long. Adelaide looked at her coffee. "Not a husband, in my case," she said quietly. "My father. He died when I was 30. He was the only person who believed I could run the company. I built Meridian as a way of answering a question he never got to finish asking. Did you answer it? I proved something. That is not the same thing." He did not answer. He nodded, just once. Ella came running back, climbed into her father's lap, and beamed at Adelaide. "Can you come with us to the park? Bramble wants to see the ducks." Adelaide looked at Caleb. He gave her a small nod. Not permission, more like, "Yes, please." They walked to Boston Common. Ella went between them, one hand in her father's, one hand in Adelaide's. No one had taught her to do that. Caleb looked at Adelaide over the top of the girl's head. He did not say anything. Adelaide felt something she could not yet name. Not love, not quite. Something closer to being chosen back. 6 weeks after that first Monday, Halverson's $38 million wired into the Northern expansion account on schedule. Adelaide laid the printed wire confirmation on Caleb's desk on her way past, said nothing, and kept walking. He nodded once when he saw it. That was the entire exchange. The internal announcement came the following week. Caleb Whitmore promoted to Director of Systems Integrity, full executive role, with the contract amendment Adelaide had quietly written in, out the door by 2:55, every day, no exceptions. When she said his name at the all-hands, a few people on the systems team began to clap, organically, without anyone leading. Caleb did not stand. He nodded, and the back of his neck went faintly red, perhaps for the first time in years. That evening, she stopped by his office. 3 minutes before he left for school pickup. She set a homemade bookmark on his desk. A small folded paper crane, slightly off-center, the wings uneven. Ella taught me. The third one came out. The first two did not. He smiled. The second smile of the entire story. Ella will be proud. Week 8. Halverson invited Adelaide and her consultant to a private dinner in New York. On the drive back to Boston in the company car, Marcus restored to the wheel after his recovery. Caleb fell asleep in the back seat, mild jet lag pulling him under. Adelaide sat across from him and watched. The shirt was still gray, still pressed sharp at the collar. He had not changed his style, even though his salary now allowed it. He did not need it to be anyone other than who he was. She sent Sophia a single text, "I think I am falling for him." Sophia replied 4 minutes later, "Everyone is falling for him in some way. I have been since week 3. Don't worry about it." Week 9. A Friday afternoon. Ella had spiked a low fever at school. Caleb left Meridian early to pick her up. Adelaide asked to come along. He did not ask why, he just nodded. At Quincy Public Elementary, Ella came out with the school nurse, nose pink, bramble tucked under her chin. She saw Adelaide standing next to Caleb at the curb. Ella ran the last few steps, and instead of her father, she went straight for Adelaide and wrapped her arms around her leg. Caleb went still. Adelaide bent down, awkward and unprepared, and lifted the girl up. Ella laid her head against Adelaide's shoulder, sniffled, said nothing. On the drive back to the apartment in Quincy, Ella slept in the back seat. Caleb drove. Adelaide sat in the front passenger seat for the first time. The streets passed in soft afternoon gold. Caleb spoke very quietly. Lindsay left on a Friday. I promised myself Ella would never have another woman walk away from her. I am not going anywhere, Adelaide said. He did not answer. He took his right hand off the wheel and laid it over her left, where it rested on the center console. 1 second, 2. Then he put it back on the wheel. That night, after Ella had been put to bed with cold medicine and a lullaby, Caleb sang flat and on purpose because Ella thought it was funny. He and Adelaide sat on the old sofa in the living room. Bramble was on the coffee table, leaning against a copy of The Little Prince. Caleb said, "Della, I need time. Not for me, for Ella." "I have time," Adelaide said. April of the following year. 5 months past Fogwell's. Meridian had been written up in a Harvard Business Review case study, From Crisis to Architecture. How active listening saved a $38 million investment. Adelaide had refused a personal interview. She agreed only on the condition that Caleb co-author. Caleb agreed only on the condition that the article focus on systemic blindness rather than a hero-engineer narrative. The piece opened with a single sentence she had insisted on. She asked him who he was. He said he was her driver that day. They were both correct. Both answers were incomplete. The board had rebuilt around the lessons of the case. Sophia had been promoted to chief of staff with a real budget and real authority, and the asset or friction triage had been replaced by something slower, less elegant, more honest. The systems team now ran a quarterly listening hour, mandatory, where anyone in the company could bring up an anomaly without naming the responsible department. Adelaide had been the one to push it through. She had cited Caleb in the proposal once, by initials only. Caleb had moved out of Quincy into a larger apartment in Jamaica Plain, closer to Ella's new school, 22 minutes from Meridian. Adelaide did not live there, not yet. She slept over on Saturday nights every other week, on the sofa with a book in her lap and Caleb's head on her thigh while he read Ella to sleep in the next room. Ella had begun calling her Della, not Mom, probably not ever, and that was the most beautiful thing about it for all three of them. A Wednesday evening in April. Adelaide came over for dinner. Caleb made pasta. Ella set the table without being asked. 3 plates, 3 napkins, the silverware lined up the way her father lined up his folders. She had memorized the spacing months ago. After dinner, Ella drifted to the living room to watch a movie. Caleb and Adelaide stood at the sink. She washed, he dried. Their hands touched on the handoff, the smallest deliberate brush, and neither of them moved away. "Della," he said quietly, "that Monday, I thought I was just driving you to the Boston Financial Tower and going back to pick up Ella. I did not know what kind of day it was. That was the day you saw the truck before it pulled out. Not everyone sees it." "No," he said. "That was the day I decided to see you." Adelaide set the plate down. She did not turn around. She could not. She would have cried. She kept her hands on the rim of the sink and said only, "I have been dismissed by a lot of people in my life, Caleb. I have never been seen first. Thank you for that." Caleb set the towel down. He stood behind her, not touching, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of his flannel shirt at her shoulder blades. "I will keep seeing," he said, "every morning, as long as you need it." She turned around. Her eyes were wet, but the rest of her was steady. She did not say anything. She rested her forehead against his shoulder, the place where his collar met his neck, and she stood there for a long time. In the living room, Ella laughed at something on the screen. The last of the pasta cooled on the stove. Outside the window, the spring light held in the kitchen a moment longer before it slipped down behind the rooftops. A year and 4 months after that first Monday. October. Saturday morning. Fogwell's. Beacon Hill. The same wooden table by the window where they had sat the first time. Ella was 9 now. She wore small reading glasses she had only recently started needing, and she was folding an orange paper crane for the cafe owner, whose birthday was tomorrow. Caleb and Adelaide sat across from each other. Adelaide was not wearing her grandfather's lighthouse pin. She had given it to Ella the previous month. The girl wore it on the chest of her school sweater, the small silver lighthouse catching the autumn light. Caleb pulled a small wooden box from his flannel pocket. Not a ring box. He set it on the table and pushed it across. Inside was a silver pin, hand-forged, 2 lighthouses, one large, one small, standing together on the same rock ledge. "I had a jeweler in Salem make it," he said. "4 weeks. I did not know when the right time to give it to you would be. Today, here, seemed like a good day." Adelaide took it. Her hands trembled slightly. Ella looked up. "Della, put it on." "So we met." Adelaide pinned it to her collar. She looked at Caleb. Her eyes were bright. She did not cry. "Caleb, that Monday morning, before you asked about the northern route, I thought a gig driver was a nuisance variable in my day." Caleb smiled, a slow, private one. "I thought a CEO in the back seat was a long shift that needed quiet." She said, "And now you are the only person I want to ride behind, or beside, for the rest of my life." He did not say me too. He reached across the table and took her hand. Ella, by accident or on purpose, pushed the last waffle to the center of the table for the 3 of them to share. They left Fogwell's. Outside, the maple trees on Beacon Hill were red and full. Ella walked between them, one hand in Caleb's, one hand in Adelaide's. Caleb still had the old Toyota Camry. He had not traded it in. He said when Adelaide had asked once, "This car drove Della to the building where she changed my life. I am not selling it." On the drive home to Jamaica Plain, Ella, in the back seat, asked Della, "Next year, will you come pick me up with Daddy? Every Friday?" Adelaide looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at her in the rearview mirror. The same mirror that, exactly 1 year ago, had flicked across an unsignaling truck before it pulled into the lane. Now it crossed only her face. "If Della wants to," he said. Adelaide answered the girl, and answered the man, in a single sentence. Every Friday, and every Monday too. The camera, if there had been one, would have pulled back. The Camry rolling into a Boston street lined with red maples. 3 figures inside. A stuffed rabbit named Bramble propped up in the back seat. A small silver lighthouse on a girl's sweater catching the late autumn sun. Competence, this story had learned, never announces itself. Sometimes it arrives in a faded button-down shirt at a curb on the morning everything has already gone wrong. And sometimes, if you are lucky enough to look a second time, it stays.